January 1996, Varginha, Brazil. Something entered Earth's atmosphere that would change our understanding of humanity's place in the universe forever. What began with a simple radar alert would escalate into the most compelling and disturbing alien contact case in history. A case that would lead to 2 deaths, 3 government cover-ups, and evidence that remains classified to this day. Throughout the long history of UFO encounters, witnesses typically report lights in the sky, strange objects moving at impossible speeds. But the Varginha incident was different. For the first time, multiple credible witnesses encountered beings that were clearly not from Earth. More importantly, there was physical evidence, and that evidence proved deadly. It began on January 13, 1996, at 1:30 a.m. The North American Aerospace Defense Command detected an unknown object entering Earth's atmosphere on a trajectory towards southern Brazil. When Brazilian authorities demanded classification, NORAD's response sent shockwaves through military channels. Unknown. Not experimental aircraft. Not satellite debris. Unknown. Brazil was no stranger to unexplained aerial phenomena. Since the 1950s, the country had documented more UFO encounters than nearly any other nation. The most famous occurred in 1986, during what became known as the Night of the UFOs. 21 objects, some nearly 300 feet in diameter, were tracked simultaneously over multiple Brazilian cities. Fighter jets scrambled to intercept, only to witness these craft perform maneuvers that defied physics. Instant acceleration from 0 to 15,000 kilometers per hour, right-angle turns that would tear any conventional aircraft apart. The Brazilian Minister of Aeronautics made an unprecedented public statement. From this moment, I think it can no longer be denied that UFOs exist. A decade later, something would return to Brazilian airspace, but this time, it was in trouble. Aurelina de Freitas noticed it first. Her cattle were behaving strangely that morning, running in agitated patterns she'd never witnessed before. Looking out her farmhouse window, she saw something hovering over her pasture. A cigar-shaped craft approximately the size of a school bus. White smoke billowed from what appeared to be a crack along its side. The object moved erratically, struggling to maintain altitude. She quickly woke her husband, Eurico. Together, they watched this impossible craft labor across their property, eventually disappearing over a nearby ridge. In a later interview, Aurelina would recall, "It moved slowly, covered in smoke, and made no noise. It had no light of its own." Carlos de Souza, an ultralight pilot driving to work, spotted the same craft barely 300 feet off the ground. Through its windows, he could see a significant crack running along its metallic hull. As a pilot himself, he recognized an aircraft in distress. He followed in his truck as the object made a steep dive behind the hills. What he found at the crash site defied explanation. The stench hit him first, an overwhelming smell of ammonia and sulfur that burned his eyes and caught in his throat. He had to cover his nose with his shirt just to breathe. Scattered across the field were pieces of impossibly light metal. When he picked up a sheet and tried to crumple it, it would spring back to its original shape the moment he released it, floating to the ground like a feather. Before he could investigate further, military trucks roared onto the scene. Armed soldiers surrounded him, rifles raised. They ordered him to leave immediately. Later that day, 2 men in dark suits approached him at a local cafe. They knew details about his life that chilled him to the bone. His family members, his address, his daily routine. Their message was clear: forget everything you saw. But the military was too late. Something had already escaped the crash site. For the next week, residents of Varginha reported unprecedented military activity throughout the city. Trucks moved in convoys. Armed personnel conducted systematic sweeps of neighborhoods. They were searching for something, or someone. Then came January 20th, the day that would put Varginha on the global map. At 3:30 p.m., sisters Lilian and Valkyria Silva, ages 16 and 14, along with their friend Katia Xavier, age 21, were taking their usual shortcut through a vacant lot. What they encountered would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Crouched against a wall was a being unlike anything on Earth. It stood approximately 4 feet tall, with reddish-brown skin that seemed to glisten with an oily substance. Its head was massively oversized, featuring 3 distinct horn-like protrusions. But most disturbing were its eyes, large, red, and seemingly without pupils. Years later, Lillian would recall that moment with perfect clarity. I looked into its eyes and saw that it was frightened. Just as I was frightened, the creature was also frightened. I saw that it was scared of us, so it was an exchange of fears, its and ours. The girls reported something extraordinary. They could sense the creature's emotions. It was terrified, in pain, and desperately needed help. But fear overcame empathy, and they ran. When their mother arrived 30 minutes later, she found strange 3-toed footprints in the dirt. But before they could document anything, military personnel swarmed the area. The incident was about to take a deadly turn. At approximately 6 p.m., military police officers Marco Eli Cereze and Eric Lopes were patrolling near the park when a small, dark figure darted across the road. Officer Cereze managed to capture the creature with his bare hands. They rushed it to the regional hospital. Within hours, Cereze began feeling ill. His skin felt oddly greasy, covered in a substance that wouldn't wash off. The smell of ammonia clung to him like a second skin. Over the next 3 weeks, his condition deteriorated rapidly. Doctors were baffled by his symptoms. On February 15, 1996, Marco Cereze died. He was just 23 years old. When his widow tried to access his medical records, she found crucial documents missing. The official cause of death: a strong hospital infection after operation. But Cereze wasn't the only casualty. At the local zoo, biologist Dr. Leila Cabral reported that another creature had been captured. Within weeks, 5 animals died mysteriously. Their tissues showed signs of an unknown caustic substance. The military response intensified. The hospital wing where one creature was taken was suddenly quarantined. 50 doctors and staff were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements under threat of imprisonment. But perhaps most telling was what happened next. Jose Manuel Fernandez, an air traffic controller at the nearby ESA Army base, witnessed something unprecedented: a United States Air Force cargo plane landing without proper authorization. 2 military helicopters arrived from Varginha, carrying an unusual cargo that was quickly loaded onto the American aircraft. It departed immediately. For 26 years, the Brazilian military maintained their official explanation. The girls had encountered a local homeless man nicknamed Mudinho. The military presence was part of a routine training exercise. Officer Cereze died from an unrelated infection. Then in 2022, the wall of silence began to crack. A military insider known only as Military X came forward. His testimony confirmed what witnesses had been saying for decades. He had seen the creature in the hospital: the oily skin, the 3-toed feet, the unmistakable smell of ammonia that lingered for days. Most significantly, he revealed that video evidence existed. One soldier present had a film camera. This footage, which remains classified, could prove the reality of what happened in Varginha. The cover-up extended beyond Brazil. Months after the incident, foreign men in the dark suits visited witnesses, offering money for silence and making threats when bribes were refused. Some witnesses disappeared. Others, like Officer Cereze's partner Eric Lopes, became hostile to any questioning. When documentary filmmakers approached him in 2022, he threatened to shoot them if they didn't leave his property. Today, Varginha has embraced its connection to the unknown. UFO-themed shops line its streets. A water tower bears a flying saucer design. But beneath the tourist-friendly exterior, serious questions remain. In the decades since, our understanding of the universe has expanded dramatically. We've discovered thousands of potentially habitable planets. Governments worldwide have begun to acknowledge the reality of unexplained aerial phenomena. The Pentagon has established offices specifically to track what they now call unidentified aerial phenomena. Yet the Varginha incident remains unique, not just lights in the sky or grainy footage, but close contact, physical evidence, and casualties on both sides. Perhaps that's why the case remains classified. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. We may not be ready for contact, not because we lack the technology or understanding, but because we still react to the unknown with fear and violence. The 3 young women who encountered the creature that day felt its emotions. Not aggression or hostility, but fear. A being lost and injured on a strange world, seeking help. As humanity ventures further into space and other civilizations potentially approach Earth, the Varginha incident stands as both a warning and a lesson. When contact comes, and it will come, how will we respond? With weapons and quarantine zones? Or with empathy and understanding? The truth about what happened in Brazil remains hidden in classified files and suppressed videos. But perhaps the real question isn't what we're hiding from them, but what we're hiding from ourselves. Because somewhere in the vast darkness of space, they're watching, waiting to see what we've learned from Varginha,